Welcome everyone to this episode of Build Stuff, Be Kind. We have the incredible pleasure of having a conversation with a local legend, Veronique James of the James Agency. We had the pleasure of interacting probably, 5 years ago with Keep Nature Wild, and have just loved seeing the growth that you guys have had and the way that you approach building an agency, building a team, the feeling we felt coming and meeting with you guys. The dynamic of the team, the environment that you created is always something that stood out to me, and excited to really dive into that today.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Yeah, and I think since we've met, gosh, it has been 5 years, hasn't? We've, I appreciate you recognizing us as a creative and design firm, but we're actually a full service agency. Full service is all facets of marketing. So, digital,
Awesome.
web, PR, a lot of media buying, both traditional and digital. So, you name it, we handle it from the full, focus of what visual communications looks like. Recently, we've coined this phrase called business to human instead of business to business or business to community, or consumer. Because the formula is kind of the same. It's really connecting a brand to an end target. And so we're really pioneering that integrated marketing approach to B2H, which is our new jam.
Yeah. I really love that idea of business to human. You offer all of these services. You're helping brands scale and grow in so many ways and in so many platforms, and trying to communicate messages, but recognizing that it's that human connection that matters.
I think that's what really came out of COVID in marketing, right? Is there's this blended line, or these, kind of gray area now. It's no longer about businesses communicating to businesses or businesses communicating to audiences in the consumer space. It's about people feeling a connection to the brand promise. A logo isn't a logo, it's a promise of what's to come. A brand is a promise of what's to come, right? And I think that post-COVID, people are a lot more discerning about where they're voting with their dollars and how they're representing themselves. Totally. And, the speed of communication is so much more rapid that, we want to make sure when we're working with our clients that there's this genuine connection. Because if there isn't, then there starts to be this clutter problem, and you can tell it's falsified or fake or forced. And so that's something that we are really trying to pride ourselves and pioneer in comparison to, I think, what's happening maybe within our competitive landscape is seeking first to understand, right? Understanding what is the intent here? What are we trying to accomplish? Yes, campaigns need to have return on investment. Of course, they need to perform, for sure. But really, what are we genuinely trying to communicate to the end user? And like you and I, we want to be not treated like a number. We want to feel like we're a human connection to the brands that we advocate or buy from.
Totally.
So it's a beautiful thing, right? COVID had a lot of hardships, but I think a lot of good things came out of it as well.
I love that. How are you thinking about buy-in from the client? Really show them that is providing value, connecting with people on a authentic human level. What are some of the ways you've thought of tackling that, or maybe some of the challenges that have come as you've really embraced that idea?
Sure. I'll use the most simple example that literally just happened 10 minutes ago, right? So I'll answer your second question first, and then we'll go back to how we're approaching it with clients. But we have a new business discovery happening in the conference room, literally right across from my office right now. And it's a gentleman who I've met in passing by way of another client. And so as he was walking past my office to have the meeting with our sales director, he said, "Hey, I just want to extend some kudos to you." And I said, "What is that?" And he said, typically when I'm being brought into a sales meeting, they go and, they buy Subway or Jimmy John's, and, it's $10 and it's not good. He said, "Kudos to you for allowing your team to create what," he regarded this as a white glove service. He said, he asked me what I wanted for lunch. He sent me a menu. He let me choose from the menu. It was a nicer, and so you think about the most simple experience, right, of connecting to somebody on a level of curating a custom connection.
Yeah.
And that's essentially what my sales director just did, right? Before they've even sat down, he said, I want you to be in the driver's seat with me. Let's have a great lunch together. Let's spend some money to enjoy something that we're, versus just checking the box. So applying that same kind of white glove philosophy, when we're talking with clients and we're starting on an engagement, we first seek to understand. And while every agency pioneers using data and qualitative research and quantitative, that's all very, very important.
Yeah.
We're also layering some of the, the EQ, the psychographics, things that we're learning about the client. So we're learning about their HR. We're learning about maybe some of the soft skills we talked about, or, some of the things that are happening. And when you approach an agency client relationship that way, when you're consulting around a campaign directive and you're thinking beyond just the black and white, or what I tell my team, the linear, I always tell my staff, mind the gap, or what's the white space in this? The white space is typically the psychological in between, not just the data that we see on paper. And because of that, clients feel a tremendous sense of commitment from us as an agency partner. We're not only going to them with a proactive solution for their campaign initiatives, and we're having, quantifiable data there to say, this is why we think this would work. But then we're layering that on with the relationship and the gaining of understanding of the trials and tribulations and what's keeping them up at night, and understanding that, because that's what creates a sticky, in a good way, sticky client agency relationship. And if a client feels like they're part of a community bigger than themselves and they're inspired and they feel connected, that will be interpreted, I believe, into the feedback they deliver when we're going through the creative process or the strategic process, because there's more vulnerability, they're more willing to share. And then furthermore, my team is more inspired because the feedback is native and it's thoughtful or intentional. That's the word I want to use. All of that translates to the quality of the work. You can always tell when an agency is working, I use this kind of crass phrase like trash for cash. They follow the steps, they use the data, but they probably don't really care about the client or the client's objectives. And you can kind of tell in the work, right? And then the relationship often fizzles within a year or two. That happens.
Churn and burn.
Right. And for us, having a relationship that lasts for 5 years, 8 years, 10 years, that's an incredible experience to really be a part of the high highs, the low lows, the wins. And so, I kind of backwards reverse engineered into this question for you, but hopefully you're seeing what I'm saying here. Yeah. And so then that translates then also to, human capital as an agency. You have a very low churn and people want to work here and be here, be in the trenches together, and then the accolades, the best places to work, those things are just a cherry on the top, right? That's it feels good to get those awards, but really what matters is that we have a really safe place to work. And then 100%. The clients feel that too.
Yeah, man, so many nuggets there. I think the first thing that stands out to me is trust. When you take that time to ask someone, like, it's one thing to think, oh, we should provide lunch for a client. They're coming in at a lunchtime meeting. They're probably going to be hungry. Let's just grab something and that's enough, right? And I think a lot of times brands we think, oh, this is something good that we're doing, providing food. But when you really think about people and your own experience, would you want to eat food that you don't necessarily have a choice in eating? Maybe you like certain things you don't like. Like, we all like certain things, we don't like other things. Someone that's at least acknowledging that fact and saying, hey, what do you actually want to eat? And let's actually spend this time enjoying a conversation rather than like, oh man,
just
you got me
checking
the wrong
box.
food, or checking the box. And I think that is another big thing, is like just checking a box. Like going through the motions isn't enough when you're aligned on the principle of value and of providing value. I mean, so many like steps along the process you just described is like value. Coming in that first from that first lunch meeting, which most people would kind of like, maybe they're trying to pitch, trying to sell, trying to get as much out of that initial meeting as possible, but you're really setting the stage for this like long-term experience that now that trust is formed, now each meeting can compound, and that trust and that ability for that client to really, like you said, be vulnerable. Like that's not a word I would automatically think about marketing strategy of like the client relationship, but it's so important.
It's
that
the
is
perfect analogy, though. If you think about like letting somebody have a menu and choosing their experience is very much like what we want for our clients, because if they're in the driver's seat or the passenger seat, because we're typically driving, hypothetically, you're more likely to be aligned, right? When you're bringing them along in the process. So what an amazing analogy to say, I'm letting you choose how we're going to experience this time together. That's very intentional. Similarly, in starting and cultivating a relationship in business, and you asked me at the top of the conversation about perspective. Perspective for us is about alignment and bringing the client along, and that eliminates all the choke points and the friction points. I think a lot of agencies, and maybe it doesn't happen as often now, but they used to go behind a curtain and work up a bunch of concepts or ideas, strategies, and then they present them in this Don Draper like ta-da moment. And while the client may be wowed by the creativity or the overwhelming effect of like, wow, this is a lot for me to consider, client was brought along in the journey, right? And sometimes that can become inefficient or retroactively profitable, because then you probably have to go back, revisit some thoughts, some changes. So we like to seek to first understand, let them curate their experience, be very intentional with our time together, enjoy the experience because we're in lockstep. It's not the most exciting way because you're not having that aha, ta-da moment, but the results are so much more fruitful because the client feels like they were bought into it as equally as the agency, right?
Yeah, I think it's that idea of not overlooking the insights, that there is this like very interesting dynamic with agencies at times where it's like almost this competition of who's right and who's wrong.
Right.
But it sounds like to me, your focus with your clients is neither of you are right. Their customer, or the insight that the customer is writing, or the value that the customer is looking for, is where the answer lies. And more aligned you guys can be on that, you're going to come to the solutions much more naturally and natively that will actually impact the end consumer, client, customer for that business.
And then longevity too. It creates a sense of, you go back to the word trust. That's a fundamental pillar of the James agency. It creates trust. So then we can be brave together the next opportunity that comes around, because we've built that foundation. We continue to level up. There are a lot of agencies that I don't know really effectively build trust with their clients through that seeking first to understand and alignment exercises. And so every time there's a new idea, it's kind of like you're improving ground all the time. When we want to level up or suggest some creative ideas that may push the client outside of their comfort zone, you have to have that trust to be able to leverage like, hey, I've got you. Remember how we just did that together and it worked and you believed and you felt like you're a part of it. So, sadly, I feel like that's something that we're missing a lot just in business lately. And subtleties there, right? If we send a proposal to a client and at their request, and we've done extensive discoveries and we've had meetings, and then the client can't even confirm receipt, that breaks down that trust, right? Again, so there's even those little touch points that I think in business we need to get back to paying attention to, because those are the fibers that I think curate a really solid experience. So I know I'm kind of weaving in and out of this analogy here, but it's important. And marketing is a tender environment. Marketing people are tender, emotional people. Creative people in general are very ethereal. So, while I'm sure sometimes we all wish that we had robots to just power through things, that's just not
you're not just building an AI army over there at the James agency?
AI is awesome, and it makes us go fast and be smarter than we can be. But gosh, you just cannot take the human element out of marketing. You just can't.
Yeah, 100%. I think there's so much value in the speed. It's a tool just like any of the tools that we use, from design software to analytics software. Like it's all enabling, but at the end of the day, that understanding of relationships, connection, value, and understanding, I think is such a crucial part of the value you provide. How do you cultivate that within the agency? The idea of, cultivating value, cultivating the experience for your employees, for your team, for like, how do you create that trust as CEO of the James Agency? You have big goals. You're growing this business. You have a lot of things that you're juggling and trying to make happen and trying to push for and achieve and stretch yourself, stretch your team, stretch, all the opportunities that are in front of you. How do you make sure that you have an equal balance of the structure and the strategy to achieve that growth and maintain that human element?
Sure. I think that's the most beautiful thing about TJ. And I do not take that for granted a single minute. It's an amazing place to work because, yes, while I started the business and I've grown the business, I have leaders that follow in my vision, and also very unique. I have a 19-year chief creative officer, a 12-year creative director, a 11-year president. That's unheard of to have that kind of tenured leadership and vision alignment. Culture in most businesses is like the beer in the fridge and the dogs. I have all of that. I have a dog sitting on my desk right now. You can't see her in the frame, but we have music playing. Everybody's wearing whatever they want to wear. That's awesome, but that's not culture. That's not the fiber or the backbone for us. The backbone of operational culture for us means it's a safe place to work, and not safe as in like, I'm afraid somebody's going to break into the building or someone's going to hurt me. It's about understanding that when we are doing deep reflections, some people call them postmortems, but if we're talking about a campaign that maybe something went wrong, instead of pointing fingers and being like, you did this wrong, you dropped the ball. It's what did we learn? How do we apply this? How do we move forward together? Adopting a philosophy. Brene Brown has an amazing book called Dare to Lead, and she uses a narrative called, rumbling. And rumbling is not about challenging or being disruptive or being full of friction. It's about feeling the confidence and the power of trusting your inner truth or your inner voice to be able to speak to your counterpart, your employee, whatever it may be, and say, I have to get this out because I want you to be better. And so I'm going to share with you what I'm seeing, or, maybe you're not, you're dropping the ball here, or there's something, something I can see something's wrong there, but it's always framed for us. And this takes actually quite a bit of untraining when people join us, because the stigma of business is cards to the chest and, I'm going to own this to the finish line. So we have to untrain people to let go of that and realize that, winning together and losing together means having hard conversations, but really the principle of, I want you and I to do better together. And
love that.
So we have these mechanisms within the agency of how we communicate with each other and the frequency of how we do that. And when there's a challenge or an opportunity, there's a structure, and this is where I come into play, right, is making sure that everybody understands the bumpers on the lanes to have those safe conversations, right? Totally. And I compare the James Agency to some of my friends who own businesses, or even in my husband's corporation that he works for. And what I notice is there's people who respect each other and genuinely believe in each other as characters and people. Yeah. But the leadership has lacked or has missed the opportunity to put those really thoughtful bumpers on the lanes of how that conversation should be happening or cultivating. And it gets to the point where it's too far down the line. There starts to be a manifestation of frustration or whatever it is. And so with that, right, we learn how to have those discussions. And then we also learn how to divorce ourselves from criticism. Criticism is an amazing, amazing tool in our industry because it allows us to get better. It allows us to continue to optimize. But divorcing ourselves from criticism means that instead of taking it as a negative or personally, applying that failing data to optimize, to get better, right? So similarly to how we apply that to our conversations peer-to-peer or peer-to-leader or leader-to-peer, we're also applying that same narrative to our clients. So when a client says, oh, I hate this, or okay, instead of being like, oh, and seizing up after we've just bled on a campaign and spent a lot of nights, taking that as an opportunity to be like, great, like, let's dig in more. And
For sure.
by divorcing ourselves, we're realizing we're going to let the emotions fall to the floor, and we're going to understand that there's value in the context, and we're going to apply it as an opportunity. Another really good book, The Gap and the Gain by Dan Sullivan. Have you read that one? There's always a gap in anything in our lives, right? There's always some kind of negative, but out of the gap, there's always a gain. There's always something there, right? So highly recommend that one too. So a little bit of that, and it's infectious. It really is. And then it's hard because when I can't tell you how many employees have moved on, moved to out of state or worked for a different company. And they come back a couple years later for coffee or for lunch, and they say, I just can't find that anywhere else again. Yeah. I'm not feeling that safe place, rumble, win together, lose together type of ecosystem. And it's very testifying for me when somebody says, I took it for granted. I had no idea how special it was. And
that's not a standard. And especially, I mean, you touched on something that is so interesting, which is literally as an agency or anyone working in marketing, like, you are a feedback machine. That is your job. It's like literally 1000%. Take all of it in and like, okay, where do we improve? But thinking about it on that level with team, with deliverables, with client interactions is like such a great way to look at it for a growth opportunity. It's like not every post on social is going to hit. Not every campaign is going to hit in the same way. Not every ad, and so it's like being able to take that and apply that same understanding, because I feel like most people would be like, oh yeah, we're not going to bat 1,000 with our social posts. Not everyone's going to go viral. But when it's like, oh, this, that you created wasn't as good as it could be, it's like, oh, there's that immediate, feeling of judgment or rub, but to take it as like, oh, great, an area to learn, an area to grow, like, cool. What are one or two ways that someone who doesn't have the structure and trust in place that you have, of what's one step that they could potentially take in creating those processes with their team and feedback? Or what do you feel like is the most important one that people should start mapping towards?
Sure. I suspect you're probably on the second phase of your business, because I remember I'm coming up on 19 years. I was a startup, right? So I remember what it felt like in the beginning to DIY and bootstrap, right? And then I brought on a couple people. I had a small consortium of freelancers that inevitably became W-2 employees. We were 5 to 7 people. And that's when I started realizing that my DIY bootstrapped, singular-minded processes and systems no longer were agnostic for a group. It wasn't going to work that way.
Grab a hammer and start banging on stuff.
Right.
Only worked for so long.
Right. Yeah. And then, and there's so many different phases within business. And then you get to a really good place where you're efficient and kind of boiler room and small. And then you get to a point where all of a sudden I put my big girl pants on and I've got a bigger team, and, there's significant revenue, and all of a sudden time becomes the challenge. Time and capacity is the next kind of major milestone. That's an opportunity to look at those processes and systems. And each of those levels or journey milestones of processes and systems, first of all, kudos to you for acknowledging that those processes and systems need to be adapted. What I learned in my journey, and TJA now is a very well-oiled machine. Every day we are still turning dials and pulling levers, but little dials. We're not having to blow up things. We invent new processes, which is pretty cool and fun, but we're not starting from scratch. There has to be consistency. So that's very important. So something I learned probably like year 5, year 7 is, if you're initiating, I don't like telling people what to do, so I'm going to change my phrasing here. When I initiated a change or a big lift or a big process that was going to require adaptation, putting it in place is one thing, but holding people accountable and practicing extreme ownership is another. And the only way that you can get a mass body of people to adapt something Because as an entrepreneur, it's already ingrained in you. You're like, I'm bought in, I've implemented it. This should be easy. Why aren't you guys following the process? Right. And you're like,
for sure.
But to get 20 people to paddle in the same direction is harder because they have their own native ways of doing things. And so my biggest takeaway is consistency is the king or queen of success. We're gender agnostic here, right? By reminding repeatedly, there's one source of truth for communication, stay away from email and Slack, put it all in the project management software, constantly being that governor of compliance. And compliance feels a little restrictive or militant to me, but it's our responsibility as entrepreneurs to be the ones to toe the line for consistency. Because if you're going to implement a process or a system and you're going to look to somebody else to be that towing the line magician of getting everybody to face the same
making
direction,
sure that it happens.
It's not going to happen. Now, large corporations have operational directors and integration directors. That's all they do, right? That's their role. But for smaller businesses, let's say sub 50 staff, that's the CEO or the owner's responsibility is to toe the line on making sure everybody's, facing the North Star. So we instituted a couple really, really big changes in the last 24 months. We completely abandoned, we were in like API soup, Sean. We had Google Docs and we had QuickBooks and we had, our time tracking system and we had our server. And it was like, that was, again, a major milestone in business, right? When you start realizing that what used to be really great systems and processes, all of a sudden you're like floundering. And so we literally abandoned all of those and went to an enterprise system. So from start to finish, CRM to creative proofing to closing, financial reporting and resource analysis, capacity analysis. It's all in this one package. What a significant overhaul. I was bought into it. I obviously paid for the software. I paid for the consultants. But then I also had to build in the practice of accountability and checking in and making sure people were towing the line as well to make sure that it became innate. Yeah. Because I faced a ton of friction, I'm not going to lie, right? And it took a year for us to make that migration, not tactically and functionally. It just took us a year to get everybody to realize buy-in. Perfect. Internal adoption. That's a great phrase.
Where the process and the system fades away to where then you can execute on the deliverables, on the creative, on the strategy, on the things that you're really trying to provide value around. But it's like putting in the reps. It's doing
I say that phrase
tactical
all
things.
The time. Putting in the reps. Yes.
Yeah, because it's like you don't just show up to the game ready to roll. It's like you've got to have the fundamentals down. As you're building out team, as you're growing, you've grown. I don't know what your current team size looks like.
42 right now. 42 with a couple more before the end of the year. So we'll probably be 50, let's say, by Q2 of next year.
So how do you go about evaluating talent from skill set to soft skills? Making sure that not only can they execute the desired role, but also will fit into this system, this process, this environment, this culture that you've created at the James Agency.
It's a great question because this was something that we were very focused on in the beginning of the year. We did a rapid hiring schedule because we had a lot of new business insurgents and we recognized that we needed some more resources to support on the service delivery side. And the more we grow, the further I am getting kind of pulled away from some of those really intimate moments of hiring and vetting potential talent. And we have process and systems put in a multi-step or multi-hula hoop interview practice, but we get 10 to 15 resumes a day. Those can be, it's fun, right? And those can be kind of a blur after a while when you're looking, and there can be more objectivity when you're looking at, for example, a creative, because you could see in their portfolio right away what their capabilities are. But maybe for a client services person, you can't evaluate those soft, hard skills, that critical thinking. So in addition to our already very thoughtful and intentional interview practice, and God bless the people who interview with us because it's long. We know we're testing for critical thinking. We're testing also for references. We're doing a culture kind of assessment. And the culture assessment's kind of fun because we'll take people to lunch or to a
Nice.
dinner or a happy hour. And while the team is
Take them to Subway.
Right. No, probably not.
That's
But while we're having really thoughtful, usually the potential direct report won't attend, or I won't attend. It's usually the people they would be rubbing elbows with. But while they're in that space, my team is also watching how they're treating the server. Like, are they being respectful?
Yeah.
Are they taking the food first? Are they offering it to the people? Like, we watch for those subtleties, because those are some of those things that transfer into our industry, which is very hospitality first, right? So but then recently I started realizing that the further away I was getting, I love data. I love critical, like, hard facts too. I have a left and right side, creative and mathematical brain. I engaged Culture Index. If you're familiar, it's a kind of a IQ assessment. It's pretty amazing, the algorithm. It's a 2-page survey of just a bunch of words. One your innate, and then one of what your perceived job, words, how you qualify yourself. And then it spits out this pretty cool algorithm. And so we invested in that system, and we use that at the jump.
What's that called?
We know it's called Culture Index. And there are a lot of assessments out there, right? And I've used almost all of them. This one I have found to be the most specific, because you get to see how they are with autonomy and social. Are they emotive? Are they, do they have a slower pace, a fast pace, conformity? Where are they? There's an element of kind of like where they are with their energy units. Like, are they being are they being burnt out right now? Are they being underutilized? Some creativity and logic metrics in there. And so what's cool about that is when somebody applies, they immediately get the Culture Index link. And then what we can do is we can use that, knowing that there's a human being behind this data. We're not going to let that go. But now what we can do is we can use that information to have, again, you're going to hear this word a million times with me today, intentional interview conversations, intentional discussions. We can test not a one-size-fits-all approach for creative assessment, but now we can curate the assessment to be based on either the gap or the gain of what we're seeing in this data. So I really, really have been enjoying that. And then again, we talk about internal adoption. It can't just be top down for me. So I brought in some key leaders. They were trained on it. Then we rolled it out to the agency wide. Then each department met on each other's so they could learn their culture index. Now we're actually having clients take the surveys as well, so we can understand. So when we take something we like, we cut deep, right? We go all in.
Full top to bottom. Integration.
Yes, right. But it takes me kind of hammering and being like, what's the CI say? What's the, have you looked at, and now we're using it from a cultural tool too. So not only just like vetting for talent, but then retaining talent. If a director is having a challenge with an employee, I can say, have you looked at the Culture Index? Because as I recall, it's hard for me to memorize all of them. John is an inductive learner. He learns by way of repetition and experience versus being told what to do. Sounds like you're just giving him instructions and then cutting him loose. Why don't you try having him shout at you 5 times, 4 times, right? So it's pretty cool. It's definitely shifted our way. It is powerful. It's data the fact of the matter of it is, but there's so many ethereal kind of behind the scenes, cool, creepy elements of it that
some of those things are wild, because it's like,
it is wild.
Like, shows you visually, and I like to see things visually. So it's like, oh, that's how this all plays out. It's not just us, our personalities, but here's our personalities, like visually how they intertwine.
So it's been really fun. We're 8 months in on that. We have an amazing facilitator who really speaks so intelligently and articulately about it to make it really make sense, because it is like a different language. And now you can look at these 4 dots and know exactly what kind of archetype, that particular staff. It's really cool. The cool thing about it is the facilitator invests 2 days of intensive training versus just being like, okay, you bought the program, set it and forget it, see you later. So that aligns with our ethos and methodology too, of bringing people along. So it's been a really good move for us. But at the end of the day, we cannot forget that there's people behind this data though too. So we still go through our practice of getting to know folks. And I'm sure many CEOs say this, but hire slow, fire fast, right? Because if we joke, we use this acronym, NFL, not for long. If we can tell somebody's going to be an NFL or just really isn't working, we'd rather dismiss quickly, because that can become an exceptionally toxic element to the agency and other people.
The question that comes to mind when you're describing these systems, these processes from the early days to now, and you're leveling up even further, you've got, a larger team at this point. You're working with really great clients and partners. Why do you care so much? Why do you care so much?
One of my friends, he's kind of like my Yoda. He's like, why? He's like, why do you push so hard? Why are you trying so hard? Of course, I love the industry. I love to be creative. I love to solve problems for people and their business. There's really nothing more satisfying than hearing somebody say, I've got this challenge or this, I hate the word problems. I'll say opportunity. I've got this opportunity, help me fix it. And then collaboratively coming up with something that works and it makes them money or it solves that issue. Gosh, it's like the coolest thing in the world. So I'm so lucky. I think there's a huge vacancy, one, for heart-centered leadership in our industry to start. So I have a genuine intention to continue to hopefully shift. There is a stigma about agencies and like this turn and burn and work until 2 a.m. and nobody gives enough about, your work-life. No, like you can be hustling super hard, right? And be a executive in our space and still have a life, right? And you can love the work and love the people, which half the time I feel like you either want to be here or you want to win and not both sides of the napkin. For us, we want to be here and want to win. And, the reason why I started the agency when I did is because I believe there had to be a better way, right? I'd worked for an agency with a lot of people who wanted to be there, but didn't really want to win. And then I switched to a firm. It was all competitive. Nobody wanted to be there. Highly, just no one really cared about each other.
Totally.
And so I was missing that. And I started this firm. And again, I'm the luckiest human on the planet to have people who genuinely and intentionally believe the same thing. And maybe one day I'll feel tired or, feel like my rope has run out, but I know I have a solid 20 years of hustle left and I'm not a spring chicken. I'm definitely on the older side. And it's exciting.
A lot left in the tank for sure.
I hope so. And, I will again go back to COVID. COVID for me was interesting because pre-COVID, I was starting to feel, while we were growing, I was kind of feel a little bored. I wasn't feeling challenged. I was kind of feeling this calling to be a part of something bigger. I was questioning my own professional development and wondering if I should take more of a board of advisors role and seek, some professional development for myself. And then COVID happened and it threw me into the crux of the business because we went into survival mode,
For sure.
I can't remember if I had shared this with you, but it's because we met before COVID, we took a 62% net loss in about 30 minutes because 60% of our business was hospitality. It was hotels and restaurants. And I at first I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know if they were going to be able to survive, totally. And then kind of got out of my pity swamp a few days later. And I was like, if I'm going to rebuild something, I need to rebuild something from what I have. And so I really thought about it, decided to not do any furloughs or pay cuts or layoffs. I kept the entire team employed and just focused on diversifying the agency. And we ended the year just shy of profitable. I mean, like to go from 62% in the red to just barely, it was an incredible testament. And it made me reignite my love for the business of like, not only do I like solving problems and building things and creating community, right? Because that's, I think, one of my superpowers is community. But then to see the amazing result of what this agency could do in 9 months, right?
Totally.
I was like, this place is dope. I'm not leaving, I'm not going anywhere. It was super fun. And I still feel that same ignite. I'm here every day from almost 9 to 7, and it doesn't feel like a grind. I go home, I hang out with my kids, probably work until, 10 weekends, typical,
I know that grind.
entrepreneurial life for sure.
For sure.
But I don't hate it. There are days where I don't love it always, right? But I'm still inspired. I'm still stoked. I still walk in the door every day, and I've got a smile on my face.
What else would you be doing? You're exactly where you're meant to be. For sure, there's no question.
Right.
The approach and just all the things are so aligned with what you have to offer and bring to the table.
Yeah.
You mentioned community, which also is an obsession of mine. I'd love to go down that rabbit hole a bit with you. What is it about community that you love, and what is true community to you?
What I love about my community, I can't speak to everybody's community because I think it's different for everybody. My life is fast. I accomplish more in 24 hours than most people do in a week or a month. I know that. I max out in moments. So my life has to be simplified in the arenas of which I contribute my time. Right. And so my family, of course, I have 2 amazing children, an incredible and supportive husband, and that's my tribe. That's, those are my homies, and we're close, and we travel together and we experience life together. And it's a privilege to be their mom and wife. Yeah. And then I've got my work community, and this is another version of family for me. Because go back to trust. Let's use that word. I have to trust that they have my back, and I know, and I hope that they know this, that I trust and have their back too. Totally. And community, my favorite quote is of my dad's. My dad is an ex-naval officer, and he used to say this to me all the time when I would complain about, I've had quite a few stepsisters and stepbrothers in my life. And I used to get frustrated when they were like in my business, right? Yeah. And my dad would always say, many hands make for light work. And I didn't really understand that until I got into my professional, lane and my adulthood, that totally. If you want to go fast, you go by yourself. If you want to go far, you bring them along. And I think that this homage to my dad, Dr. James, and my team is always like, oh, V, not the many hands make for light work. And I'm like, but let me ask you a question. You tried to get this to the finish line all by yourself. Yeah. And now you're burnout. You haven't had anybody poke holes at your work. So now you're having to go back and fix stuff. If you had brought people along and you worked together and you trusted in your community, you would have gotten there faster. The work would have been better. You would have known that you had a support system, right? So I'm going on a bit of a tangent, so I apologize. Nope, but for me, community is an ethos or a commitment of connection. Yes, of course, by definition. Yep. But even more so, it's about, alignment and vision, that certainty of intent, that clarity of direction. And when you find a group of people, small or big, and I'll go to my macro community here in a second, but that's like gold. You don't let go of that, right? And sometimes it takes a while to find that community. I see a lot of my young staff members who are in their early 20s, they're still seeking that. And it can be hard. We try to provide that here. And it feels great when a staff member says, wow, I really feel like this place is my home or my family. Totally. My macro community, I'm a part, and I'm very lucky to be a part of Entrepreneurs Organization, acronym EO. There's a YPO and EO. I've been an EO for almost 13 years now. Nice. Joined it right when I hit my first million in the business. That community is really special and important to me because I went to school for art, didn't go to school for business. So having an opportunity for people to be able to share their experiences with me of their journey made it so I didn't have to reinvent my own wheels every time, totally. And granted, maybe a different industry, manufacturing or food and beverage, but there's always nuggets, takeaways, things that you can take from somebody's life and be able to apply. And so that community has really become a strong foundation for me of how I navigate myself as a leader, as a business owner, as a female entrepreneur. And then I have a forum within that, which is very close. I've been a part of there's 10 people. And that's my core, right? Those are the people I go to for what I call my top 5, bottom 5%. The 90% in the middle is kind of the barista update. Yep. It's the stuff you tell, friends, uncles, aunts, whatever. Yep. But my forum, the things here that people assume that you're doing all of your day when you're actually 5. Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty intimate, right? And that's an important community for me too, to be able to have that outlet. So I
I love that. I'm gonna steal that top five,
So
bottom
let me
five.
ask you, do you have a community?
So, not structured enough in what you just described. I mean, I have definitely a community and family. I have my wife, and I have two kids as well, two boys who are just young crazies, and they're the best. And then I have a community. I go to church, every Sunday, and have a community there. But that community you described with, that forum or mastermind that you have, that I think I have pieces of that, and something that I am actually trying to lean more into. We built Keep Nature Wild in a lot of ways very siloed. We have homies and people who have other e-com businesses, and we had people we'd connect with, but I think we were just like so heads down in it that I disconnected. I'm a connector. I love to connect with people and be in the mix, and
you're doing
talk
it
to
now.
people and engage with people, and so I think I lost a bit of that, and something we are trying to create is more of a platform of community for here in Arizona. I was very active in like the startup community and tech community in Utah while I was going to school, and I just went to an event last month, and it's like 30 minutes of showing up to kind of the first event that day. There was 10 just insanely meaningful conversations, and people then literally walking me across the event to introduce me to this person and that person. And I think that's something that, even though I'm fifth generation Arizona, I have lots of friends and people. I'm trying to lean more into connecting with business community. Part of why I reached out to you to connect, and like starting to form what I think is something that in general in Arizona, I think we lack this. Everything's so spread out. There's a lot of incredible businesses and brands, and a lot of it is operating in a siloed kind of manner. And I think from conversations I've had and things that I see, there's an opportunity to really start to connect those dots for sure.
Yeah, I use the phrase, not my own. EO uses this phrase called intimacy, instant connection or instant deep conversations. And I think that's what you experienced when you went to that event.
Love
and
that.
It was like
immediately
totally. People had your interests at heart.
Yep.
You were creating connections, and excuse me, those connections become dominoes for more. Those are the types of communities I'm constantly seeking, right? My time is so precious, and the old saying is your most valuable, asset. Yes, that's true. But really it's because I want to be intentional in every conversation I have. Similarly, like we have a huddle system. We don't do like one-on-ones. We do what's called huddles. And
nice.
I've got my direct reports that I huddle with, and then I have my skip levels, but we have this form that I have the team. It's like a journaling form, almost like
cool.
a bullet journal style. And I have them fill it out, and they have to send it to me, Slack, email, whatever, 24 hours in advance. And it asks really thoughtful questions like, what are 3 wins that you've experienced since we last talked? What are 3 learnings?
Nice.
What are some things, we dropped the ball? What do you wish you knew more of? There's some cool stuff there. And then it says, how can we hold you accountable to that? But the reason why I asked them to send it to me 24 hours in advance is because I handle and manage so much. When I'm having that sit down, that 30-minute huddle with somebody, I want to be able to extract from that document the 5%, the top 5, bottom 5, and have a conversation about that, the intimacy versus the barista update, the 90% in between, which makes that 30 minutes really, really powerful. But if somebody had sent it to me and dropped it on my desk the minute we were getting ready to have that conversation, we're processing, we're reviewing, I'm connecting the dots. And I like to tell stories. I don't like to tell people what to do. So if I don't get that early, then I don't have that percolating, I remember when I was 26 years old, how I was feeling about this. I'm going to tell that story tomorrow in this huddle versus because they'll receive that direction so much more innately and versus me just telling them, go talk to this person if you're having, that doesn't work. Right. So by having those predisposed intimate documents allows me to be intentional with my time. And my goal is to max out my moments. I have a tattoo on my arm that says joie de vivre. It means zest for life. And really every minute for me needs to be like pretty epic. And
Totally.
I have a friend named Mike, and sometimes he'll send me a text. He's like, "You have the most energy of anybody I've ever met." He's like, "How do you do that?" And it's because I'm pre-planning, I'm thinking, I'm being intentional. And showing up 100%. Yeah.
How do you think about community for your clients? 'Cause it's something that we really think about is like, how is like value in community and like the strategies and the way we really think about what you described of aligning with your clients' goals and what their consumers' goals are, and then mapping towards that, I think resonates so much. And most people, when they're talking about community, are talking about more followers, more revenue, more growth, more reach, not community at all. It's just numbers and transactions. How do you approach community with clients, or is that something that you guys try to implement into your strategy with your clients?
I think it starts literally from the day they walk in the door. I believe that clients hire agencies versus, I think freelancers are awesome. I think independent contractors are awesome too. There's a right for everything, right? For the need. But I think when a client hires an agency, it's because, I think I mentioned this, they want to be a part of something bigger than either themselves or their business. And they want to be feeling influenced by a broader perspective or a third party lens. And so, we try to create that sense of community the second somebody joins the agency with multiple touch points and tactics. When they walk into the physical office, there's a sign on the front desk that says, "What up, Sean?" Like we're always trying to create that sense of, and sometimes we'll play the music the client likes because we've asked during the onboarding
Pretty
process.
sure you guys did that when we came in, even 5 years ago.
Sure did. And we probably played the music that you guys said that you were into, right? Because we're infusing that.
I love it.
And that's important to us, right? And again, that goes back to that tailored custom, community and connection for our clients when we're talking about building strategies to generate awareness or target audiences. That takes us all the way back to the top of our call today is about being genuine and intentional. It's a privilege to say that we're friends with 95% of our clients, and that comes through just a natural growth of connection and doing good work together and having those hard conversations, like we said. Additionally, I think that clients who truly have a wherewithal of their business and their objectives, and they have a sense of, we look for very specific elements of a potential client that's the right fit for us. If they're brave, do they communicate with respect, right? We know then we can extrapolate that and we can translate that into the campaign, which almost 100% cultivates a community by proxy of what we're doing together, right? But the stars don't always align. Sometimes a client has an amazing product. Maybe they have really cool people that work for them, but leadership is toxic within the business. It does. It actually does affect the community outside of their business. And there's only so much an agency can do to fix that, right?
Yeah. I think at scale, most people can feel intent across someone's persona or presence or a brand's goals. If they're communicating one thing but their intent is another, you're gonna feel it. You're gonna get a sense.
Alignment sets you free. Shane, our creative director, always says that.
Really?
So,
love that. Tell me about some things that you guys are working on. I mean, you have this wealth of knowledge and experience. You talked about influencing part of leadership and changing the dynamic. Are there ways that you are strategically going about that?
Yes, and yes. That's really what my job is to pay attention to that strategic, visionary, forward thinking, that's what I do every day. Right. And, there's this theme for 23 for the agency is, we always come up with a theme this year is expand. And I never really realized when we came to the inception of expand in January, how that would impact us both physically, operationally, strategically, and in our day to day. And then personally, like we're really challenging ourselves. So, from a personal perspective, we're challenging all of our staff, myself included, to continue to expand our knowledge base and to put ourselves in positions of education and mentorship outside of the firm. And then on a physical practice, we're expanding the office space an additional 4,000 square feet. So we'll be at 12,000 and change by January 1st, and thinking about how that ecosystem looks in contrast to what's happening in all of the business community of, people continuing to move more and more remote from a cost savings perspective and shrinking their physical footprint. We're doing the opposite. We're going against the grain there because we have a demand for people who want to be together. And then what we found an opportunity at the end of last year, while we have always had like a step-by-step process as it pertains to discovery and research and alignment and cultivating all these like data points, first and third party data points to then inform how we go to market for our clients. We never really branded that or put like a bow around it. And so we decided to practice what we preached. And it was really interesting because the recognition of that then challenged us, I would say March, April of this year, to go through a brand redefinition of the agency itself internally. Not so much a physical brand, but more so how are we sounding in our proposals? How are we taking our clients through this practice, and what does it mean? And so we labeled this formula stratagem, and again, cutting deep, right? Love like that. Once we commit to something, it becomes like, and so we're really pioneering in the agency this package, this formula. I don't like using the word package, this formula, this practice. And it's becoming like an ethos. It's how we're not only discovering clients, but then how we're continuing to work with our clients. And I think the best part about that is what clients are recognizing is when they came out of COVID, there's so much uncertainty in the economic community, interest rates changing, there's so much pressure from the news and the real estate world is so volatile. And I think a lot of our clients are like, we don't know what's coming. We don't know. And AI is great, but it only takes you up until, old ChatGPT until September of 21. And so you can't take that human element. And so we said, there's an opportunity here to focus on strategic thinking for what comes next, and hopefully creating a sense of comfortability and assurance for our clients that we will do our best to diagnose as far in advance as we possibly can with what we're able to do as a subject matter expert agency partner. And that's, again, tying it back to trust, tying back to alignment, right? So Stratagem's been super cool. That's really affected our operations in the way that, as I mentioned, everything from our proposals to how we're billing and what types of clients we're taking on, which is fun. So Expand has been really incredible. And then for me personally, as a leader, it's then challenged me to recognize what is my part in this. And that's a question that I ask myself all the time. How am I playing a part in this vision and this change? And is it serving me and my community? And sometimes the volume gets really loud. We all have volume in our life, right? And and I got to pay attention when it gets really loud, because it usually means I need to slow down and take a beat and look around a little bit, because life can be busy. But it's been a really fruitful, very, in a good way, challenging year. And when I look at where we were 10 and a half months ago, on January 1st to today, it's like we're a completely different firm. It's super cool. It's really fun.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
That's awesome. What are some things that you're excited about in the marketing landscape and the businesses you're helping grow? Are there things that you guys are looking at, or trends, or each brand, each business's objectives are different, but things that you are, whether it's AI or platforms or just strategies of thinking that get you excited?
I get really excited. While I love the software trends and the platform trends, and that's very pragmatic, and I think every agency owner can speak to that. Some of the things I'm really enjoying is watching, again, I don't love the word problem. I like the word opportunity, with some of the financial purse strings changing in the capital markets and the financing there. It's really presented itself some what I consider windows of clarity. And I'm loving the types of clients right now that have a 5-year vision. Specifically, we're getting asked a lot to propose for these like cities within cities, like these mixed use
Oh,
development
yeah,
where they're cultivating
totally.
entertainment and food and beverage and infill
Love it.
multifamily and hospitality. And not every agency has the 19 years of experience like we do, because when we started the firm, we were heavy luxury real estate. And then the crash 2008 happened. And then we diversified in food and beverage. And then we found a niche in hospitality. And then we kind of, started realizing by proxy that entertainment flowed into that. There's not a lot of
Totally.
agencies that have that mixed use
Yeah,
development tied. So I get really excited because I'm seeing these really passionate out of state developers wanting to create insurgency of economic
totally.
impact into our community in Arizona, and
Yeah,
hearing about what they want to do in the next 3 to 5 years from a job perspective, from elevating and kind of gentrifying some of these smaller cities within Arizona that
yep,
maybe don't have that capital insurgence. I'm like super fired up about that. And it's been really a
love
privilege
that.
to have those conversations with those guys
Totally.
and hear about their big vision for our state and
Yeah,
honestly, I feel like they're just looking at this blip, whatever it is that we're in right now,
yeah,
where many are
for
feeling
sure.
like it's a brick wall that they can't get through. They're just charging
Yeah.
right through it, right?
Wow, just so many incredible insights and value. We love to end the podcast with a final question. What role has kindness played in building your success?
It's the only way. I mean, I had a staff member. What did she used to say? She used to say, "You can catch more bees with honey than vinegar." I think that's
Mm,
it, right?
yep,
It's
no doubt.
true. It's really hard to be kind
Yeah,
when our industry is hard. Like agency life
totally.
is just hard, right?
Yep.
Um, but surrounding yourself with people who are kind and having, gratitude in our hearts is something that we really try to champion here at the agency.
Yeah,
Thank you so much for writing me this email. That means you took time out of your day to
totally.
acknowledge me, like gratitude. And I think about the word kind, and I'm relating to my position as a mom right now. And my
Mm,
kids are in elementary school; they're 8 and 9, and
yep.
they're going to an elementary school where their acronym of the name of their school, the first letter is K. And so one
Mm,
of their core pillars or fundamentals is be kind.
mm,
And
cool.
and so a lot of times I'll watch my kids navigate their versions of life, the smaller encapsulated versions of what I'm going through maybe now. And I'll look
Yeah,
at her and my daughter, and I'll say, "Are you being kind right now? Do you have
yeah.
gratitude in your heart? Are you
Hmm.
starting this conversation with gratitude today?" And she would say, "No." And I don't think that we have enough moments in our life and business to take a beat and be
Yeah,
like, "Am I grateful right now? Because
totally.
pressure is privilege, right? It is.
Yeah,
I get to, I don't have to, right? And one of my
yep.
staff members who's an aspiring author, she wrote a beautiful post recently and she talked about, I get to, I don't have to, because
Yeah,
work is fast. We're in the thick of a holiday season,
totally.
campaign planning, new
Yep.
business, renewals, right? Um, it's hard, but
Yeah,
also what a blessing and how exciting that we have more business than we can process. We have
totally.
more opportunities than we can essentially execute from a
Yeah,
new business perspective, right? So
totally.
it all comes back to kindness.
Yeah, I love that. I think there's this idea, I think, especially in business, that kindness is weakness, and this
Yeah.
tradition, I guess, of being kind is being soft. And but really, a big part of the motivation of this podcast and of these conversations is this idea of like, if we were to just visually just like scroll back, super speed back through this entire conversation, this theme of kindness, is embedded in everything that,
Mhm.
from my perspective, that you have been able to do. It's not
Thank you.
this kindness of, oh, I'm just going to let you walk all over me, or this kindness of, just allowing for things to go by. It's like, I'm going to be kind and deliver you the feedback that you need to grow. I'm going to be kind
Mhm.
and put these principles in place, these structures in place, so we can experience growth and that we can all experience this win together. And I think that's, to me, you're such a powerful example of how important these soft skills are in building very impactful, very meaningful, very accomplished businesses, that it doesn't have to be from this like hard-nosed, break things and yell. And I'm sure there's times where, things happen and emotions are high and there's things on the line, but it's like that trust, that foundation that you have built in all of this process, all of these things that you have not only implemented, but reinforced in how you choose to spend your time and live your life and implement things, I think is a great example to me, great example to, I'm sure, many who will tune in and watch this and listen in, that there is a different way to go about achieving the success that we want, that it can be our own way, and that it can be kind, and it can be strong to do it in a way that actually cares for the people that we're doing it with.
Yeah. Thank you. It's really thoughtful of you. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing your experience. Thank you for joining us here today, and for sharing your insights. I, was tempted. I even did take some notes. Tempted to just bust out my notebook and just write so many things down. So I think a lot of really great insights, great nuggets, and thank you. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you all as well for tuning in. This has been a really great episode of Build Stuff, Be Kind, and we will see you again soon. All right. Dang. That was